Hey guys, it's Hayes with CheatSheetPros.com. Today is Thursday, February 24th, and we are back from the NBA All-Star break, ready for the second half of the season. I wanted to do a quick tutorial, not really a tutorial, but just kind of show you the differences on the NBA cheat sheet for the second half. I've cleaned it up a little bit, merged some tabs, played with it, so I wanted to run over and just kind of show you guys what we have going on. So we're going to have 6 tabs down here at the bottom. 90% of it is the same. There's just a few subtle changes. So we still have our boom bust, our GPP algo. We still have our minutes, but what you'll see here is we have our player label. I moved it over so it's a little bit easier to see. We're going to go over that here in a minute. Custom projections are still there, so you can copy and paste and upload them. We have our industry projections for DraftKings FanDuel. Another change here is I flipped up the DVP. So in 2020, we had a phenomenal year, and it was basically looking at DVP over the last 2 weeks and looking at the percentage of fantasy points scored to a position. And so we found if it's like 22, 23, 24% of the total points scored to one position, that was a smash spot, and those spots usually exceeded. So you can see here we have the fantasy points to the position. Now you got to be careful because some players will play power forward and center, and so it's just going to pull the one where they play the majority of the possession. So if you know a player plays a couple different positions, either throw this out the window. I just kind of look at guards and then big men, power forwards and centers. This is going to be the percentage of points to that position, and this is the total fantasy points allowed. So it's basically just a percentage of these two numbers here in the middle, and we highlighted everything over 23, I believe. Yeah, 23.1. So anything over 23 is green, and I think anything, it doesn't look like I have a red on there. It's going to do red if it's less than 18 for something like that. And then what I did is I brought back our hit counter. So we had something similar on the prior cheat sheet, and honestly, it was only a week ago. I cannot remember, but this is one thing that I really love, and I had a whole separate tab for it on a whole nother sheet a few years ago, and I spent a lot of time on it going back and looking at it. So in the prior cheat sheet, what we did is we showed the last 10 days of games. Well, what I did is I just pulled it out to the last 16 days so we could get a full 2 weeks and then a couple rest days to get a better glimpse of what we're doing. And then you can see here the guys in, I guess let me make sure you can see that on your screen. So, and this is our color coding up here. So the red is basically 6x value and higher. So red is really good. If the player was between 5x and 6x, it's green. And then 4.5x to 5x, so just missed but still did really well. It is this goldish look. And if it was 4.5x or lower, which means crappy, then it was blue. So you can just kind of look and see everything color-coded. So quickly I could look across here and say, okay, this guy has 4 6x games in his last 5. So that's someone I want to take a look at. So we also have a counter here, so you can sort it by high to low to see who has the most 6x games over the last 2 weeks. And then I had an extra space here, so I went ahead and said, hey, let's see what 7x looks like. So 7x is not color-coded, but I went ahead and put it in here. So you can see this person here has 4 7x games, so that's really good. So if you're playing GPPs, you need players with upside. So for example, let me see if I can find one. So here's a player that has 5 6x games, but only 2 7x games. So he does have some upside, but if this was a 0, so I could say, hey, he's hitting 5 and 6x quite a bit, but he's not really getting to 7, so you probably don't want to use him for a GPP because 5 and 6x isn't going to win you a GPP. And then had another space over here, so I decided to say, hey, let's see what percentage of times they hit 5x. And you can see the green, I think 70% and above is green and 40% and below is red. Just a quick color code. So if you're between two guys, you can look across here, for example, say you're between these two guys, you're sorted by price. You could say, okay, they both have 1 7x game. They're both doing decent for 6x games, 4 and 3, but then hitting value, this one's hitting 83% of the time. He's only hitting 43% of the time. So then maybe you go with this guy up here because he has a better hit rate for the 5x. And then you can also look here at the DVP and say, okay, well, this top guy, they're giving up 10 more points total, a higher percentage to his position, and about 9 more points to his position. So I put all this together so you can kind of make some decisions between some players, because that's typically when I play DFS, what it comes down to is like I have room for 3 guys and I have 6 guys I'm looking at. Which ones do I want to go with? And then you can look back and say, okay, these 6x games, were they back in this range, a week and a half ago, or were they recent in the last X amount of games? And then going over here, we got the same player, quick look. We're going to have projected points, fantasy points per minute, looking at the last 5 versus the season. And I cleaned this up a little bit, so a lot of people, well, I guess not a lot of people, so me, like I upload custom projections and do different lineups. So I wanted the player and the projection next to each other so you could copy and paste this into your own optimizer. So you can copy the names and then you can do our custom projections, and that's going to spit out some different lineups than like industry average projections. If you want to upload like the basic industry average projections, just come over here and copy this for DraftKings, this for FanDuel, excuse me, and it's going to get you those. And then if you get, what I like to do, if I get a lineup where I've got 5 guys that I really like in there, I'll lock them in, and then I'll come over here and I'll upload these projections and then lock those 5 guys in and run it 10 more times and see how it fills it in to give me something different than the industry average. So these projections over here, if you're doing fantasy, it's basically the last 5 fantasy point per minute, so it's a quick glimpse of what they're doing right now. So if they're hot, they're going to be really hot. If they're cold, they're going to be really cold, times the projected minutes for the current day. So what that's going to do, for example, your fantasy points per minute over here, say this player is at, let me find one with a big difference. So we'll take Bogdanovic. So on the season, he's playing at a 0.91 fantasy point per minute, but over the last 5 games, he's up 31%, playing at 1.22. So what this projection is doing, it's going to take his current projected minutes times 1.22, and it's going to spit out a 6.6x value on his current salary. Where you can see my custom projections, it pulls a lot of the last 5, but not all of it. It still has some weight on the season, so it only gives him a 6x value. So this is going to give you something completely different if you upload these 2 projections. So just something fun to play with. We left the stud index in here. Typically, if I'm between 2 players and really on the fence, I'll take the one with the higher stud index. That's just a mix of like their fantasy points per game average, fantasy point per minute, usage, minutes played. It's going to give you the solid players. You can see here, Trendon Watford, whoever that is, he's got a minus 0.6 versus Jaden McDaniels is up to 50.9. And then this is our minute breakdown. Some people really want to dig into minutes because that's what is a key in fantasy. So you can see minute average. So projection, average last 3, last 5, last 10, and then specifically what they played each of the last 5 games. So a lot of information for fantasy. And then I want to go back over here to the player labels. I love these. These were awesome in 2020, and then 2021 we had the pandemic and we kind of moved some stuff around, kind of got lost in the shuffle. But it's basically going to be your top 2 is going to be diamond and mini diamond. Diamonds aren't going to show up very often, just like in 2020, but when they do, they are in a smash spot, solid player with good production. I believe the diamond is players over a 1.1 fantasy point per minute, so they've got a healthy fantasy point per minute production. They're playing over 30 minutes. They're in a DVP spot where they're getting 23% or more of the total fantasy points allowed. And then there's some other parameters. They have to have like so many, it's 3 or 4 6x games in the last 2 weeks before it'll fall into the diamond category. If it hits most of the items but falls just below, it's going to go to your mini diamond, which we can see there's a couple of them up today, and we'll take a look at them. When you fall down from mini diamond, I didn't really know which way to go, so what I wanted to do was differentiate between the players that have a cap ceiling or limited upside and the value plays. So you can see here, so just think green is good. So there's 3 different greens here. So, well, actually I got all 3 right here. So we have our value plays, and I just, in parentheses, made it real obvious. He's got a positive DVP, so it'll say value DVP plus. And so if you want to look at that, that means he's getting a high percentage of points to his DVP spot. And then this person here says value upside. And so what that means is they've got a large amount of 6x games, so they've been doing really well. So those are the 2 different value plays. They're both value plays on our custom projections, but it just tells you why one's popping with a good DVP, one's popping with upside. And then if they don't pop on either one, it's just going to say mid value. So for example, this guy, he's projected as a value, but he doesn't have a lot of 6x games over the last 2 weeks, and that might be because he didn't play a lot of minutes, and suddenly he's projected to play a bunch of minutes, and their DVP isn't a smash spot where it's like 22, 23% or more. So just look for the green. Green's good, basically. Some of these other ones, if they didn't meet any of the parameters to be a solid value play, it just says industry pick, risky. So basically what that means is the industry is, they have a lot of players where it's like, hey, he's a value player today. Well, he might have a fantasy point per minute production, and here we'll look at a couple of them that's like super low. So I found that a lot of them, so 1.03, 1.08, 0.89, 1.1, 1.09, so some of those aren't bad. So then it's going to fall down to minutes. So like they're only playing 20 minutes, but he's averaged 12 minutes over the last 5. Well, he's got a lot of risk because he might not play those minutes. This person's playing less than 30 minutes, but his production's really low, 0.8 to 0.89. That's tough for someone like that to have a big GPP. So those guys have some risk. And then the blue, you see, it's a value play, but they've got little upside. And these players you can see here, like they have a hit rate that's really low, or the 6x games, they've got 0, 1, and 1. He had one 7x game, but they have a really low ceiling, so to speak, over the last 2 weeks. So they really haven't done much. So those are the guys that are really going to struggle to pop. And if you look at them, it's like Bagley and Bruce Brown. Like, it's hard to win a GPP with Bruce Brown, especially with the other people on there. And so what you can do when you're looking at this, so let's look at some mini diamonds. You can come in here and just click, I'll show you again. Just click this little drop down nugget, and on select all, unselect them, and then you can find mini diamond. Click that, and it's going to bring up the mini diamonds. So you can see here today there's actually 5 of them. So let's take a look at them. So they're all projected to play over 25 minutes, and they're averaging over 25 minutes except for Davion Mitchell. And then you can see our projections. We have them all pretty much over 5x value except for Davion. He's right on the fence at 4.99. And then you can see here they've got a decent hit rate. They've got a big chunk of 6x games and a big chunk of 7x games for a couple of them. So these top 2 guys, look at that. We have 6x, 5x, 6x, 6x, and a 6x back here. And then he's coming off of a subpar performance, but then 6x, 6x, 6x. Had 3 6x games. So these 3 games in the 40s, and that's Steven Adams, and let's see what his price is $5,600. So he's putting over 7x. So some of those are 8x, 9x value. So they're going to give you the good spots. None of them got to the diamond because of the DVP. It's your standard 18, 19%. You need down, bud. 18, 19%. But you can see here they're giving up a ton of fantasy points, but none of this really pops. But you can see all of them have a pretty decent fantasy point per minute production. He's up 31%. He's up 18%. Gallinari's up 2%, up 18%, up 8%. So they're guys that could perform really well. And they're usually guys that are priced fairly decent. So you can look at these as kind of core plays to build around. But again, kind of make your own decision, decide what you want. One of the main things is I come in here and I sort by my custom projections. And well, here, let me show you this. So this is like the industry projection here that everybody has for optimizers. Most of them are within 0.2 of each other. So if you sort this one high to low, just look at the player levels. Look how many guys they have up here with very little upside and these industry picks risk. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 guys that we have green that we like in theirs. And this guy, we've even got projected down at 3x. And then if you flip over to our projections, you see we kind of push down some of those limited upside low guys. Now look, now we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of the top 10 have either upside, good DVP spots. That's going to give you a little bit better player pool. Now we are going to have some guys projected high, and it could be because of minutes, it could be because of the DVP. That's going to be like industry picks. They're going to pop up there. It's just hard when someone's price low not to get that high. But I'm going to show you again. So like look at look at all the green and the mini diamonds we have up here in the top section of our value plays. And then you flip over here and look at all the blue. So, and I'm not saying the blue plays are bad. I'm just saying right now they haven't really shown us anything that we want to go after. So that's kind of what we got for the daily fantasy portion of it. Flip over here. We revamped the DVP tab. This is going to be good for fantasy and player props. And I wanted to kind of merge it because we had 3 different spots that we go to it. So, sorry, somebody was talking in the chat and I was looking at it. If you want to see all the teams, this little cog up here, just click it and you can see I filtered it out. Hit clear and it will give you the entire league, all the games, all the ranks. But you can see here, if there's no game, I've got a little pop-up that just says no game on it. So when I filtered that out, it just shows you the games today. This is total fantasy points allowed over the last 2 weeks. And this is to each position. So you don't have to narrow in and say, okay, small forwards, he's 44.4, that's 42.6. There's really not a lot of difference there. What you're wanting to do is say, hey, these teams are giving up the most fantasy points per game. These are not. There's not a lot of value here. And I mean, look across the board at all the red. So these teams are tough. Phoenix and Boston. And this team over here is what they're allowing here. So if you find a good spot like point guards, you want to target this column. So this is the opponent. So you could say Detroit is giving up 58.9 fantasy points to the point guard position and a massive amount of fantasy points just in general. So we want to look at Cleveland players, specifically Cleveland guards. That's how I would interpret that. This is a quick, if you don't want to look at numbers, sometimes numbers hurt my eyes and I don't want to see it. This is just the ranks over the last 2 weeks, and this is for like all stats to the position. So if a guy's getting points and rebounds and assists and doing well, this is going to give you just a quick look. And how you would interpret this is say, okay, Sacramento, really tough against point guards, but they're giving up everything to shooting guards and centers. So I would say, okay, for Denver, I want to look at shooting guards and centers. If you don't want to look at these specific points, this will give you a rough ranking. Team totals, I wanted a section to just show what the total is. So total points allowed, and this is over the last 2 weeks, and then a ranking next to it, because when I was looking at this, after rebuilding this, I was like, man, what's the difference between 107 and 117? Well, I wanted to put a rank in there, and then I put a little black line just to kind of give your eyes a break, so you can see like fantasy points, or actual points last 2 weeks, what they're giving up total. Same with rebounds, same with assists, and we just combined them all, points, rebounds, assists. So if you're doing player props, this is a good place to look for targets. And then I wanted to separate out each position, what they're doing, and put it on the same sheet. So to point guards, this is what they're giving up, points, rebounds, assist, PRA, and then I ranked out just PRA, so you can kind of basically look across here and say, okay, point guards, who's got the best spot? It's going to be here. So Chicago's giving up a bunch to point guards, so we would look at Trae Young, and you can just see across here, so 26.5 points, 7 rebounds, 10.8 assists, PRA of 44.4, and that's far better than a lot of these other spots on there. So that's a spot where you may want to look at point guards. Same thing, go down here to centers. And then down here we have our in the paint stats. You notice on the other sheet we had rebounds, assists. Well, they're just up here. I just combined them so it's a cleaner look. So we've got the points allowed in the paint the last 2 weeks, percentage of the total points that are allowed, the ranks, so you can find big guys, power forwards, centers to teams giving up a lot of points in the paint. That's good for player props, prize picks, DVP. I went ahead and put this in here. I haven't used it a lot. This is new. It's opponent points allowed from turnovers and second chance points. So you can see which teams give up a ton, which teams don't give up a ton. And then we got our 3-point back. So 3-point shots made over the last 2 weeks, 3-point attempts allowed, and then 3-point percentage allowed. So if you're looking for perimeter shooters, you can tell who's coming out on the perimeter and shooting really well. Over here on the tiers tab, I'll fly through this one real quick. So on the tiers tab, a lot of it is the same. We still have our ownership. I pulled in the cheat sheet projection next to the normal projection and the last 5 average. We have our fantasy point per minute production that was there. And I pulled in the DVP, the percentage and the total allowed. And then I pulled in the hit rate also. So We strung this out to 15 games. It grabs 16 from the main tab, but you can see the 5x hit rate, the 6x games, and the 7x games over this last 2-week period. And then same thing, and we got our usage stats over here. So if you're doing in tiers on DraftKings, looking at this, that's pretty self-explanatory. Our sports betting tab is pretty much the same. We flip down through these games. We still have our main model projection. We show the last 10 games, score, margin. We have them color-coded from double-digit losses, greens double-digit wins. The only thing new on this tab that I added was this little nugget right here. And the reason is I do sports betting, I do player props, and then occasionally I do fantasy about half the week. And so I just wanted to get the rankings of each position, what the team's given up over on this DVP tab. So it's basically these numbers here, but I wanted to be able to see them when I'm flipping through the games looking at sports betting, because like, for example, if I'm flipping through, let me find a team that doesn't. All right, so for here, we're looking at Boston and Brooklyn. I want to look, okay, Boston's really tough. So if you're playing any Brooklyn players, you probably, shooting guard's going to be your best spot, and they're top 5 against everything else. If you're playing Brooklyn, shooting guard, small forward, and then kind of mediocre point guard centers. But I just wanted to get an idea, like if I'm looking at player props, if I see a smash spot, if there's a play that I can go after or look at in that particular spot. Everything else is pretty much the same. Props tab, the only thing we did since we revamped the DVP, put everything in here. This is going to show you the daily projections, the last 7 average, the last 2-week average, and then we got our points, rebounds, and assists. We call our PRA projected, last 7 average, last 15 average. And then we got our prize pick. So this is going to give you our raw prize pick points, or our raw projections, our prize pick point per minute projections, and then go on down the list. And like always, you can click here, flip down, and see this for every team. And then you can tell there's 240 minutes in a game. So if they're projected here, and this says 235, there's about 5 extra minutes that needs to be spread out that didn't make it in there. Last 7, this is what we use for our player props. If you've seen any of our YouTube videos, this is the place I go to when looking for prize picks or thrive picks. The one difference that I did add is I brought in the last 10, or last 2 week, I guess it is, DVP, of the points to the primary position, the percentage, and the total allowed. And then we still have the usage in here, so this just gives you some other nuggets to compare when looking at everything. But that's kind of what we got for the second half facelift. I'm really excited about the player labels and the hit rate here for fantasy, and I also use it for props as well. But anyways, I hope this tutorial helps, and good luck, guys.